The violent unrest that has caused so much damage in the UK has not in fact happened across the UK. It has almost been exclusively confined to England. True, violent riots also took place in Belfast, Northern Ireland, but interestingly enough, even there they were largely perpetrated by British loyalists, along with a few far-right extremists from Dublin. The counter-protestors were seemingly mostly drawn from Northern Ireland's Catholic community. At least up until now, Scotland and Wales have remained peaceful. When considering why this is the case, we might look at how the English are positioned within the United Kingdom. The damage done by the riots will be felt for years to come. It was heartening to see communities coming together to resist the far-right anti-migrant violence and to clean up some of the damage and mess that had been left in the wake of the riots. For those of us who work with migrants and believe that the UK is at heart a humane and welcoming society which values compassion and dignity, these acts of solidarity are crucial in rebuilding some confidence which was shattered by the earlier events. However, as reassuring as the reaction has been, the damage done by the violence and riots is going to be felt, often in less visible ways, for years to come. At Medial Trust, a modern slavery charity who work with victims of trafficking in modern slavery, many of whom are also in the asylum system, the work we have put into building the confidence and integration of survivors has taken a massive blow. It will take time to persuade people to go out and take part in community activities, to seek jobs and even attend appointments and meetings in their local area. Many of these people were already traumatized and fearful. For many, the past week will have set them back significantly. The target list circulated by far-right groups named specific accommodation, advice centers, charities and law firms as places to target. It is not only migrants themselves, but those working with them who are now seen as legitimate targets of hatred. There was already a chronic shortage of good immigration lawyers and immigration advice out there. It is hard to believe the situation will now improve anytime soon. We were fortunate to see none of our places of work specifically targeted this week, but that sense of relief is giving way to anger. Anger, because for years now we have watched prominent commentators and politicians provoke and inflame tensions over refugees and asylum seekers and those who support them. Any talk of legitimate concerns needs a reckoning with the sheer evil and hatred that was seen in the past week. At two separate hotels where asylum seekers are housed awaiting a decision on their case, crowds, several hundred strong, gathered outside to throw missiles and threaten the occupants. There were attempts to set both hotels on fire. A mob several hundred strong attempting to incinerate people hiding in their rooms is not a protest, or even a riot. This was a lynch mob. The targets for violence identified by far-right groups and circulated via complicit and compliant social media platforms are instructive. High on the list were lawyers who represent migrants, advice centers that work with them, and charities that work to support and empower migrants. Where did these angry men get the idea that lawyers and immigration advice centers were their enemy? Not, though some might like to claim, simply from some online echo chamber of the far right. There is no need to go fishing in such places when you can hear it declared repeatedly by ministers from the dispatch box of the House of Commons, or from dozens of political speeches and repeated lurid headlines in mainstream newspapers, TV, and radio. When senior figures decry lefty lawyers in foreign courts and go out of their way to identify certain organizations as bad faith actors seeking to game the system, it should not be a surprise to anyone that such narratives gain mainstream currency. The denial of UK responsibility, either legal or moral, to support any asylum seeker arriving in the UK is not only now regarded as acceptable opinion, but something which has been repeatedly legislated for over the past 5 years. My worry is that the narrative is already becoming set that civil society has routed the fascists and that all that is needed to avoid repeats is a clampdown on social media. That social media has become an increasingly dangerous and fetid space is undoubtedly true, but you don't need to have been in the darker reaches to have regularly encountered accusations that all asylum seekers are a swarm of frauds, terrorists and sexual predators that the UK should expel by any means necessary, or to have heard that lawyers, churches, and charities are operating conveyor belts of false claims. For that, a person need just watch or read certain mainstream television programs or newspapers to hear and see all the same rhetoric, the same so-called legitimate concerns that we have heard from rioters who just tried to burn asylum seekers alive. An electricity box at the back of the car park has been burnt to a crisp while cracked windows remain visible, with several of them boarded up. The atmosphere is distinctly eerie, the quiet profound after the noise before. They were a very hate-filled mob just looking out for trouble, Ms. Bradley, who has lived near the hotel with her husband Stuart and their teenage son for 5 years, says. Ms. Bradley says she and other local residents were initially against migrants being housed at the hotel without consultation. However, she says they have been here a couple of years and I don't know of any trouble. I appreciate people have got opinions, but it was next-level hate, she says, adding it was difficult to pinpoint what the agendas were, other than just destruction and hate. She says the majority of the rioters she saw did not live in the area, adding they don't speak for us as a community. The very next day, people were out in force to start cleaning up the mess. Among them was Jade Wade, who had spent the previous day watching in horror as the chaos streamed on social media. "I'm just really disheartened, shocked, and angry," she says. The violent protests, which struck towns and cities across the country, came in the aftermath of the deaths of 3 girls in Southport on 29 July, who were killed while attending a Taylor Swift-themed dance event. The mobs jumped on a bandwagon and saw a reason to get angry, Jade says, adding they said they were protecting our children, when there were poor children in as well. It just doesn't make any sense. A lot of them didn't know why they were here. They just saw it as a reason to come along and cause violence. All we can do is just continue to stand together and not back down to them. It is a sentiment shared 96 miles 164 kilometers north in the Teesside town of Hartlepool. 5 days before the Manvers riot, Nancy Pout could only watch helplessly as protesters ran riot across her town. The Salem Center, which provides groups and support for those in the local community facing a number of issues and which MS Pout is the manager of, was one of those caught in the crossfire of bricks and bottles. "What I saw was senseless acts of violence and damage," she says, adding it was horrible. But people like her were galvanized in the aftermath. "It made us feel even more passionate about supporting our community, and we stood together with our neighbors, with my colleagues, and with the amazing men and women of Cleveland Police and said, no, this is not our town," MS Pout adds. A large group had gathered by 9 BST the morning after to start the cleanup, with volunteers being helped on with teas and coffees from other members of the community. It was a shining light out of what had been a horrible night within the community, but it really shows that the majority in Hartlepool want what's best for this town, unlike the minority that were thereon. The town pulled together. We had hundreds of people attend to try and make up for the horrible scenes of the previous night, and that support has continued throughout the weeks. So our doors are open and we are business as usual.